DreadOut Keepers of the Dark is a standalone expansion to DreadOut and sees you returning as Linda to travel into a strange pocket dimension to defeat paranormal entities trapped behind mysterious doors. The game is available on Steam and part of the DreadOut Remastered Collection on PlayStation 5 and Nintendo Switch. Atmosphere. From ominous laughing coming down dark corridors to the nauseating sound of rats squeaking as you enter a cramped sewer, the game retains a great deal of what made the original DreadOut's atmosphere so good without having the comedic moments sprinkled throughout the experience like the original did. It's altogether a more horror-focused game. The environments, still grey and lifeless, are mostly recycled from the original game with minor changes, but unless you play those two games back to back, then the creepiness of those locations still works entirely. Linda scours an abandoned village, a dark derelict school, as well as the eerie wilderness and haunted back alleys looking for ghostly activity, and it all feels electrically charged, because DreadOut always keeps you guessing what it's going to do next. Each area is its own self-contained environment, with unique enemies and ghosts that behave differently, putting you on edge for what's lurking in the area. Since not all of the things you encounter are hostile, it makes it difficult to know what to do when you see anything at all. A doll follows you around a mansion, collapsing to the ground when you turn around. A ghost of a samurai slices you to pieces if you approach it. And after just a few encounters with these sort of things, the atmosphere doesn't need to do anything directly because you'll be on edge waiting to see what's going to happen next. It helps that the environments are still misty, foggy, darkened and eerie, with unsettling ghostly sound effects playing in them. Its use of lighting casts ominous shadows over the faces of the enemies and makes some things incredibly foreboding, but the tension of waiting to see what a ghost does is really what fuels the fear in Keepers of the Dark. That's one Harry Mason. Scares. What makes the game scary is the same thing that makes it atmospheric: the ghosts. There's a massive amount of distrust when you encounter things that seem friendly based on how aggressive other ghosts can be, and bewilderment plays a huge role in the game's fear. There's one horseback ghost, then another, then multiple, and suddenly you're out of your depth being swarmed by enemies. The caveat to a lot of this is how the game doesn't really explain how to deal with some of the ghosts that you encounter, and getting knocked down over and over until you die, or repeatedly die, trying to figure out a very specific way the game wants you to defeat one of the ghosts can really drag down the experience, but on the other hand this actually works in favour for other ghosts like the aforementioned samurai as you frantically scan the area with the SLR to see if you can take a picture of it before it kills you. All of the enemies require a specific way of defeating them. There's no running in and spamming the camera until you win. You need to think things through, and this puts a lot of power into the enemy's hands. The enemy design itself is also fantastic, from horrible dog-beast combinations and the fox of many tails, to the giant floating heads that scream at you and the girl who gets more desiccated the more you take her picture, to a literal undead rock band. It's easy to see where the effort went in with this expansion. Keepers of the Dark is mostly frightening because it's again the same thing DreadOut did, but more condensed with less anticlimactic or disappointing moments. That's two Harry Masons. Sound design. The music that fills your ears mostly arises during combat, and when you're in range of something ghostly, it's ominous drones, whispery tones, and the general sound of the other world. Off-kilter drums thud through encounters, and screeching cries and wails mixed together with what sounds like ice being dragged up the neck of a violin. The music is deeply haunting and adds a lot to the boss fights. Creepy pianos and other music also emanates from points in the environment too, like someone left a record player on somewhere, though the music only comes in when something is near, and it all fades away to the game's ambiance when you're just exploring. The sound of birds chirping, crickets, or even just an eerie silence of an empty mansion. The sound effects for dealing with the ghosts can be straight up incredible in design, but often of low clarity or a bit too loud, which some may find an issue. The effects themselves, though, like the giant head letting out a cacophony of laughing and a deafening screech, is just deeply unsettling, and despite being so loud, it seems to be a deliberate design choice rather than an accident. The same effects cross over from the original as well as some of the music, with the same eerie noises coming from contact with ghosts and areas of interest. There's little to no voice acting in the expansion at all, which isn't really a problem since it was a bit spotty in the main game, and despite some environments seemingly lacking any kind of reverb, the sound design is still pretty good despite being rough around the edges. That's 3 Harry Masons. Gore. There's a few instances of gore in the game, with the ghosts having bloodier pasts and having gaping wounds, or having attacks with them vomiting eyeballs, and it's pretty disgusting to behold. There's what could be blood covering the floor in certain parts of the sewer, and there's a fair amount of gore in the game in general. It's never too much and enough to make some ghosts unpleasant to deal with. That's 4 Harry Masons. Story. The game doesn't have a great deal of story to back the main plot with. It basically slips in as a missing chapter that supposedly takes place during the original DreadOut, with the first game's antagonist sending you to a mirror realm you're supposed to break out of, which is supposed to explain why the environments are so similar, since they're all supposed to be mirror versions of the ones you see in DreadOut. The individual areas have lore of their own along with the ghosts, and these are of varying interest, with the Ghostopedia explaining the backstories of the ghosts after you defeat them. Some are a bit haphazard, but most at least provide enough to make the ghosts fairly compelling. There's not a great deal of story in the game. It does expand a little bit on existing lore for some of the things you see in DreadOut, but it's mainly a boss rush with some puzzle elements. Making the final score 4 out of 5 Harry Masons. Keepers of the Dark was not the experience I thought it was going to be, but I ended up enjoying it a lot more than the original DreadOut, maybe because of its more free-form design and the lack of silly or confusing moments. It definitely had some flaws, but I found it a pretty enjoyable time. Again, I'd like to remind you the whole thing is down to my opinion in horror games. If you don't share this opinion, then that's cool, I get it. I'd like to point out that whilst I went into the mirror realm, I didn't decide to stay, and advise you don't either. There will always be more horror reviews in the pipeline, and thanks for watching. Now let's go check out bumps in the middle of the night. Peace.